Welcome back to The Explainer. Today, we're diving into a really fascinating dynamic that plays out in rapidly developing economies. Imagine a booming nation, right? They're racing toward the future, throwing up these glittering high-rises and drafting super ambitious policies. And honestly, on paper, it looks absolutely incredible. But today, we're going to peel back the curtain on the structural realities hiding beneath that shiny facade. We're looking at Bangladesh, a country sitting at a really critical crossroads right now. Throughout today's Explainer, we're going to examine how high-level modernization policies often collide head-on with grassroots, on-the-ground realities. Okay, let's dive into this. Here's our roadmap for today. We'll start with the clash between ambition and reality, then look at the tech and AI mirage. After that, we're unmasking ghost corporations, looking at the justice system gap, and finally, upgrading traditional agriculture. Let's get right into it. Section 1. The ambition versus reality. To really grasp the scale of the ambition here, you have to look at this top-line number. Over $725 million in IT exports in just the last fiscal year. And hey, some insiders even suggest it's closer to $1 billion if you factor in freelance channels. That is undeniable massive economic progress. We're talking about more than 350 companies exporting software to over 80 countries, employing 500,000 workers in the ICT sector alone. These numbers, they paint a vivid picture of a nation that is successfully building a modern digital economy right from the ground up. But the narrative completely flips when you look at something like the Cockroach Janata Party, or CJP. This is a satirical online movement that has absolutely exploded, gathering 21 million followers on Instagram. So where did this even come from? Well, a chief justice allegedly made a pretty controversial comment, basically comparing unemployed youth to cockroaches and parasites. And rather than just getting mad, Gen Z launched this massive digital revolt. It's this incredibly sharp, parodic imitation of mainstream politics. The big takeaway here is the underlying frustration. Despite those hundreds of millions in IT experts we just talked about, you have this massive population of young people who feel entirely bypassed by the system. It's a glaring symptom of the massive gap between macroeconomic stats and everyday youth unemployment. Moving right along to Section 2, the tech and AI mirage. So check out this massive cost advantage. An AI engineer in Dhaka costs roughly a third of what an engineer in Bangalore makes, and a staggering 1/5 of an engineer in San Francisco. On paper, that makes the country an absolute magnet for the global AI gold rush. But here's the reality check. While universities are pumping out, 70,000 to 80,000 engineering and computer science grads every single year, a lot of them lack hands-on AI skills. They know the theory inside and out, sure, but they struggle with practical frameworks like TensorFlow or PyTorch. Industry execs are actually saying that fresh grads often need up to a whole year of training before they're actually productive. So the talent pipeline is wide for sure, but it just isn't ready for immediate deployment. And the skills gap isn't the only roadblock here. There are massive structural tech hurdles to jump over. First up, the payment problem. If you're a freelancer trying to earn foreign currency, the infrastructure is frustratingly primitive. PayPal doesn't offer full services, and Stripe is completely unavailable, which just drives international buyers right to other countries. Then there's a lack of robust security compliance, things like ISO 27001, which global clients absolutely demand before handing over sensitive AI data. And finally, you have a deeply fragmented internet infrastructure. With over 2,700 internet service providers, you end up with duplicated network equipment, messy routing, and those super dense overhead cables you see tangled up across the cities. So, the crucial question is, how do we actually fix this fragmentation? Well, the path forward relies heavily on developing carrier-neutral interconnection hubs in key cities like Dhaka and Chattogram. Instead of 2,700 ISPs building completely separate networks, these hubs would aggregate network traffic efficiently. And this is absolutely vital because global platforms, your Googles, Metas, and Amazons, they look for these centralized, efficient environments to deploy their edge infrastructure. It's literally the only way to shift from merely having basic connectivity to actually delivering the high-speed, ultra-reliable performance needed for heavy AI and cloud services. All right, let's turn to Section 3, unmasking ghost corporations. Here is the facade we're dealing with. The Registrar of Joint Stock Companies and Firms, the RJSC, boasts nearly 300,000 registered businesses. Policymakers, economists, and national planning documents routinely use this massive number as a proxy to measure the size of the formal economy. It sounds incredibly robust, doesn't it? But here comes the reality check. When you cross-reference that registry with the Institute of Chartered Accountants of Bangladesh's document verification system, you find that only about 57,000 entities actually complete a statutory audit. Think about that for a second. That means less than 1 in 5 registered entities is genuinely active and financially accountable. The vast majority are what we call ghost companies. These are dormant entities, maybe set up for a one-time contract, or they just never got off the ground. Having hundreds of thousands of unaccounted for companies creates massive risks for corporate tax leakage, and it allows non-compliant entities to maintain bank accounts, which throws the door wide open for money laundering. So, how do you solve a governance failure of this magnitude? The sources lay out a really pragmatic 4-step solution. Step 1 is cross-referencing the RJSC registry with the audit verification database to explicitly flag those dormant companies. Step 2 involves mapping those flagged entities directly to their Bangladesh bank accounts. Step 3 is where the teeth come in: progressive enforcement. You freeze the non-compliant bank accounts to force the directors to update their status. And finally, step 4 is the systematic delisting of companies that just simply do not exist in practice. It's essentially a masterclass in using existing data to force real corporate accountability. That brings us to Section 4, the justice system gap. On paper, the policy here is incredibly strong. The Prevention of Oppression Against Women and Children Act mandates that cases must be completed within 180 working days. The law is explicitly designed to swiftly and decisively punish abuse. As a framework, it's absolutely fantastic. However, on the ground, this system inadvertently builds a culture of impunity. A joint study by the Supreme Court and BRAC revealed some really staggering statistics. The conviction rate for abuse suspects is a mere 3%. Almost 70% of suspects escape punishment entirely. And what about that 180-day mandate? The reality is that trials actually average over 3.5 years. This incredibly lengthy, exhausting process drains families. It causes witnesses to lose interest, society forgets, and ultimately it allows perpetrators to act without any real fear of consequences. To really humanize this data, we have to look at the tragic story of 8-year-old Ramisa, who was brutally assaulted and murdered by a neighbor. Her father's initial reaction is just heartbreaking. He said, "I do not want justice, as I believe you cannot ensure justice." When citizens lose faith in the state's capacity to protect them like that, the moral legitimacy of the entire system erodes. Now, according to reports, Prime Minister Tarka Rahman recently visited the family to offer condolences and assured the father of a speedy trial. To bridge this gap and prevent this kind of deep despair from becoming the norm, some concrete steps are required. The sources outline the immediate need for special summary trials, specifically dedicated to heinous crimes against minors. This requires thorough, prompt, and completely apolitical investigations. But beyond just the legal framework, there's a broader cultural shift needed too. Society itself must stand united against deeply entrenched misogyny and violence. Finally, let's look at Section 5, upgrading traditional agriculture. The religious festival of al-Adha sees around 1.8 million cattle slaughtered in Bangladesh alone. But because the local supply can't always meet this massive, sudden surge in demand, it drives a $500 million annual cattle smuggling network from neighboring India. And the transportation conditions? They are horrific. The rules state a wagon should carry about 10 adult cattle, but in reality, smugglers cram as many as 300 cows into a single wagon. This leads to severe dehydration and muscle injury before the animals even cross the border. Once they arrive at the crowded, unhygienic markets, we see the truly dangerous side of modern consumerism take over. Consumers want large, healthy-looking cows, so sellers artificially inflate the weight of these tired, smuggled animals to make a quick profit. Research actually shows that a shocking 65% of sellers use harmful techniques and drugs to fatten the cows right before the festival. The specifics of this, straight from the research, are super alarming. Sellers are using a literal chemical cocktail. We're talking about steroids like dexamethasone, which causes severe leg numbness and dizziness in the animals. They use growth hormones that force early maturation and high-fat deposition, and they pump them full of aggressive vitamin supplements to unnaturally spike the animal's appetite. This isn't just a severe animal welfare issue, though. These chemicals pass directly into the food chain, which can cause heart problems, headaches, and breathing issues for the consumers who eventually eat the meat. And at the very end of the line, we see a real clash in methods. Due to a lack of skilled labor, crude physical restraints are often used, like tightly tying the legs of the animal and beating them. It causes immense agony. However, the proposed solutions here actually align both science and Islamic teachings, which prioritize animal welfare. By utilizing methods like penetrating captive bolt stunning or electrical stunning,
the animal is rendered unconscious, which massively reduces their suffering and pain during the slaughter process. It's a perfect example of how implementing modern, scientific techniques can actually better uphold traditional and religious values.
Which leaves us with this final, overarching question. Will Bangladesh bridge the gap between its ambitious policies and the on-the-ground realities before the window of opportunity closes? Whether we're talking about upgrading fragmented internet service providers to attract global AI, cross-referencing data to eliminate ghost corporations, delivering actual 180-day justice to grieving families, or regulating a massive cattle market, the fundamental challenge of modernization remains exactly the same. The laws and the ambitions are absolutely there. The true test, that's execution. Thank you so much for joining me on The Explainer today. Keep questioning the facade, and I'll catch you next time.